Welcome back to Zero to Hero, the series where we teach you how to teach yourself how to play VGC. And today we're back with another comprehensive turn-by-turn match analysis. This time we're looking at a great set featuring two regional champions, one of which being a Worlds finalist. The most recent tournament as of recording this was the Stockholm 2025 regional, and we'll be looking at the final match of this event. Our first competitor is Michael Kelsh, an amazing player and a relatively new one at that. Despite only having competed for a couple years, he's no slouch when it comes to Worlds placements. He placed in the top 4 at Worlds 2024 and placed second at Worlds 2023. Michael is really an incredible player. He's also the current Stockholm regional champion, so competing at this tournament, he's defending his title. Rios is his opponent in the set, and Eric is an amazing player in his own right. He's been competing since at least 2016, and his notable placements are, frankly, too numerous to recount. While he doesn't have a second place world finish like Michael, he does have a top 8 finish from Worlds 2019. He's also the 2022 EUIC champion. He has won multiple other tournaments throughout the years, including the 2022 Liverpool Regional. He has a plethora of top 4s and top 8 finishes. As mentioned, there's just too many to list. As usual, we will analyze both of their teams, take a look at the matchup, then go over all 3 games in the set, giving a turn-by-turn analysis of the board state, both players' options, and giving insight to why they make the plays that they do. Just before we take a look at Michael's team, make sure to subscribe if you haven't. Michael actually posted his own team report of this team, which includes the EV spreads, so those will be on screen in this video, and his video will be linked in the description. He goes much more in depth on reasonings for some of the specific EV spreads, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. His team is comprised of Calyrex Ice, Indeedee Female, Smeargle, Torkoal, Raging Bolt, and Urshifu Single Strike. This is a very hard Trick Room team, with its central piece of course being the powerful restricted Calyrex Ice. A relatively generic set overall, Calyrex has multiple good Terra types, with Grass, Fire, Water, and Fairy all being common. Terra Fire is particularly good on this team as it will allow it to avoid burns, and it's immune to Intimidate thanks to its item the Clear Amulet, meaning it can't have its damage reduced really in any way aside from opposing screens. It also removes all of its weaknesses except for Rock, and turns some of its weaknesses like Fire into resistances, allowing it to maintain its incredible levels of bulk. A very unique choice on this set though is Close Combat as its coverage move. Most Calyrex run High Horsepower to pair with Glacial Lance, which is super effective against the Steel and Fire types that resist Ice. Close Combat being a fighting attack also hits the Steel types that resist Ice. Although it doesn't hit Fire type super effectively anymore, really the main Fire type that gives Calyrex a problem is Incineroar, who's also a Dark type and thus still weak to Close Combat. Close Combat is more consistent, considering it deals more damage, and it can't miss like High Horsepower can. Michael also mentioned that it was great into normal types, particularly things like Terapagos, as it was seeing some increased usage. So why wasn't Close Combat popular before? Well, Close Combat lowers the user's defenses, and Calyrex is a Pokemon that really wants to preserve its strong bulk. However, that's where the rest of Michael's team comes in. Michael has not one, but 2 redirectors to help keep Calyrex alive. First up is Smeargle. Smeargle can learn nearly any move with its signature move, Sketch, so despite its low stats, it's an incredible support Pokemon, since it can combine powerful support moves in the same set in ways that no other Pokemon can. Follow Me, Spore, and Fake Out is a move combination that no other Pokemon can even come close to having. Usually Smeargle also runs Wide Guard or Protect, to stop other strong spread attacks from Restricteds or protect itself from Fake Outs. Michael, however, opted for Decorate. This raises an ally's attack and special attack by 2 stages, something any offensive Pokemon on the team benefits from. Particularly his Trick Room sweepers, Calyrex Ice and Torkoal, love to have this type of boost. Choosing Terra Grass over something like Terra Ghost for a Fake Out immunity can be used in conjunction with Follow Me to redirect any spores from opposing Amoonguss and be immune to that incoming spore. He's also chosen to run Technician over Moody. Moody is the typical ability Smeargle runs. The plan is to hopefully boost a stat like Speed to allow for fast spores, or start boosting its defenses to stick on the field for a while. Technician increases the damage of Fake Out, its only attacking move. It may seem like a bad choice since it's only boosting the Fake Out once per switch in, but with this Technician boost and having a Stab Fake Out, which no other common Fake Out users have, this Fake Out actually does some pretty decent chip damage. He's also running Max Speed on Smeargle. This is to ensure it outspeeds the other common Fake Out users, Incineroar and Rillaboom. Only a very fast Rillaboom will outspeed a max speed Smeargle. and very fast Rillabooms are very uncommon. Indeedee Female is Michael's other redirector. This is a pretty standard set with only one thing standing out as a little bit unique. But its role on the team is similar to Smeargle's. It can redirect with Follow Me, and boost an ally's damage with Helping Hand. Psychic Surge also blocks priority attacks, which can throw a wrench in Trick Room teams since they will move first regardless of Trick Room being up or not. The one slightly less common option on Indeedee Female is the Rocky Helmet. And this is very effective against things like opposing Urshifu, since it'll hit 3 times with Surging Strikes, taking 3 effects of chip damage from Rocky Helmet. Again, it's also great against many other physical attackers like Iron Hands. This chip damage really just adds up. Torkoal is next up on the list. This is a pretty standard sweeper Torkoal set, something we haven't seen much of lately, but was very popular in earlier formats. Despite having a choice specs and being locked into one move at a time, this Pokemon fits under the team incredibly well, and enables the team to have a lot of flexibility. It can function as an alternate win con to Calyrex, as a choice specs Terrifier Sun boosted Stab Eruption hits incredibly hard, even in the higher power level of restricted formats. As a backup, if Torkoal takes damage, we see Heat Wave, and as an option for single target damage, we have Weather Ball, allowing Torkoal to always dish out strong fire damage, regardless if it's taken damage or not. Earth Power is its 4th option, which allows it to hit opposing fire types super effectively. Its Drought ability is what enables the next Pokemon. Raging Bolt fits onto this team nicely as well. Of course, with the Sun active, it gets a special attack boost from Photosynthesis, allowing it to hit quite hard. Its moveset is nothing unusual, but it does have a less common item and Terra type in the Safety Goggles and Terra Electric. Terra Electric combined with the special attack boost allows this Pokemon's electric attacks to hit like a truck. Safety Goggles is also an asset to have on any tournament team, as Spore and Rage Powder immunities are invaluable. The last Pokemon on the team is Urshifu Single Strike, which carries Michael's 3rd Spore immunity, boasting Terra Grass. This Urshifu is choice banded, looking to deal huge damage, and since we do have EV spreads, it's nearly minimum speed, which will allow it to function much better in Trick Room. You see the odd minimum speed Urshifu every now and then on Trick Room teams, because one of the main ways to counter Trick Room is by using Protect a lot to stall out Trick Room turns. Using a Pokemon like Urshifu that can bypass opposing Protect really enhances Trick Room's ability to end the game before Trick Room ends. Wicked Blow, Sucker Punch, and Close Combat are staples on the Pokemon, while Iron Head allows it to hit fairy types that resist its stab attacks. Having a Dark type in this format is incredibly valuable, as it helps deal with the menace that is Calyrex Shadow. So this team's game plan is to set Trick Room with Calyrex or Indeedee, then use its 2 redirectors in Smeargle and Indeedee to keep Calyrex alive and boost its damage, allowing it to sweep. Torkoal adds an additional game plan, acting as its own win con in Trick Room, or assisting a priority central offense mode with a boosted Raging Bolt and an Urshifu. Michael seems to lead Smeargle and Calyrex quite often, which makes sense since it's the main mode of the team. A very notable point is the emphasis he put on being able to deal with opposing Amoonguss. With the Safety Goggles and 2 Terra Grass options on this team, he knows it gives the Trick Room teams harder matchups, and he's prepared for it. Let's move on to Eric's team. Unfortunately, we don't have an EV spread for this one. Lunala, Ogerpon Cornerstone, Incineroar, Screamtail, Rillaboom, and Tornadus. This is very much a solid balanced team, with 2 pivots, strong speed control, and setup potential. Lunala is the restricted of the team, so let's look at that first. Lunala was not very common in Regulation G until it took 1st place at its previous regional to this one, Vancouver 2025. It was still at less than 2% usage, and stayed at just above 2% usage for this tournament, so it's still an uncommon choice overall. Lunala's success in past formats was mostly due to its ability Shadow Shield, which functions just like Multiscale, in conjunction to having access to Trick Room and Wide Guard. Eric, however, has gone for a different route, foregoing Wide Guard and Trick Room, but opting for Calm Mind, Protect, Moongeist Beam, and Moonblast. Terra Fairy rounds out the set, giving its Moonblast a powerful stab boost, and removes its awful 4x weaknesses to Ghost and Dark. Being a Fairy type with Multiscale is quite powerful. The Leftovers item allows it to ideally recover back to full health, regaining its Shadow Shield after taking small amounts of damage. Rillaboom comes in here as an important part of the team. A very basic set of Terrifier and an Assault Vest. But the Grassy Surge, combined with Lunala's Leftovers, allows Lunala to recover quite a lot of HP each turn, increasing the odds that it can get back to full HP and have Shadow Shield active more than once. U-Turn also allows it to pivot out, as balanced teams love to do. Incineroar can come in and do Incineroar things, as it usually does. 2 interesting choices on Eric's Incineroar are the Terra type of Water and the Rocky Helmet held item. Incineroar usually run Terra Ghost or Grass to gain a fighting immunity and normal immunity, or immunity to Amoonguss Disruption. Foregoing both Terra Grass and a safety goggles makes this Incineroar much more vulnerable than most to opposing Amoonguss. It does, however, also carry Taunt. This can shut down opposing Amoonguss altogether, and is a great tool to shut down any opposing support Pokemon. Terra Water allows it to keep its ice resistance, giving it a decent matchup into Calyrex Ice Steel. It also gives it a water resistance, which is great into opposing Rapid Strike Urshifu and opposing Kyogre. Tornadus is Eric's speed control. Not having Trick Room on Lunala, Tailwind is his speed control of choice. This Tornadus set is incredibly standard, with the exception of its item. The Ability Shield prevents anything from disabling or removing Tornadus' ability, Prankster. This is a pick I have never seen before, and may seem completely useless, as it only really blocks moves like Skill Swap, which aren't seen much at all in this format. It does, however, prevent one very specific team composition, Weezing plus Calyrex Shadow. Weezing's ability, Neutralizing Gas, disables all abilities on the field except Calyrex's as one. Calyrex Shadow, being pretty much the fastest Pokemon in the format, when paired with Weezing, will turn off any opposing Prankster, meaning Calyrex can attack before a Prankster boosted Tailwind would go off, essentially allowing it to always move first. I can see this matchup giving Eric trouble, as Tailwind would be his way out of a Calyrex matchup, and having that disabled by the Weezing would be detrimental. He clearly saw more value in winning this specific matchup than he does in running something like Covert Cloak Tornadus. Ogerpon Cornerstone is a very versatile Pokemon. It can follow me to protect Lunala while allowing it to set up Calm Minds. And with Sturdy, it will always live at least one attack. It can also deal significant damage with Ivy Cudgels, especially if it Terastallizes. Power Whip is an interesting choice over the typical Wood Hammer seen on Ogerpons. These two moves have the same high base power of 120, while Wood Hammer deals recoil damage, it has 100% accuracy. Power Whip doesn't deal recoil damage, but it's more inaccurate with only 85% accuracy. Most of the time, higher accuracy is more important than avoiding recoil. But in the case of Cornerstone Ogerpon, taking any recoil damage would break its Sturdy ability, so Power Whip makes sense here to avoid that. Lastly, Screamtail is a seemingly odd choice for this team, but Eric has found a place for it. Again, boasting a relatively standard set for the Pokemon, this brings maximum disruption to games. With the combination of Disable and Encore, it's able to lock Pokemon into moves, then disable them, forcing them to struggle. Although these moves are powerful when combined together at the same time, they are still very effective even if only one of them goes off. Since he doesn't have anything like Shadow Tag to force opponents to stay in and struggle, getting hit by a single Encore or a single Disable not only essentially loses the turn for the opponent, but it also pretty much forces them to make a switch the following turn. Dazzling Gleam also allows Screamtail to still deal some damage if it gets taunted or if it's left alone in an endgame, and Terra Grass here is to avoid Amoonguss Disruption. So what is the matchup like? Although Michael has the slower team, Eric has the slower game plan. Michael's clear goal is to set Trick Room and dish out huge damage with Calyrex and or Torkoal. He even said himself in his team report that he wanted to play a team that wasn't long and drawn out. So although the team itself is slow, the game plan is pretty quick of setting Trick Room and winning. Eric likely wants to use Fake Outs to deny Trick Room from going up early. Indeedee as a partner will prevent Eric's Fake Outs altogether. It's also very likely that Smeargle has the fastest Fake Out in the matchup, and will be able to deny Incineroar or Rillaboom's Fake Outs by faking them out first. Lunala exerts great pressure on Calyrex with a super effective Moongeist Beam, especially if it's able to get up a Calm Mind or two. But both of Calyrex's Follow Me partners are Normal type, which would allow them to redirect this attack while being immune to it. Eric himself wants to set up with Lunala as mentioned, while positioning Incineroar and Rillaboom around to keep the Psychic Terrain away, and cycle Fake Outs to stall or deny Trick Room. Eric's Pokemon are mostly faster, so he doesn't need to spend time setting Tailwind with Tornadus. Since Michael's Trick Room setup is very strong and reliable, Eric is likely to find himself fighting within the Trick Room rather than being able to deny it, and he will need to use strong positioning skills to fight back and stall it out. This is overall a pretty even matchup. Although Michael has a lot of tools to get his Trick Room going with multiple support Pokemon, Eric has a very bulky team that can still fight back within Trick Room and can stall it out having multiple Protects and 2 Pivot Pokemon. So what Pokemon is each player likely to bring? Keep in mind these players have already played each other earlier in this tournament, so they both know what their best brings are at this point. And they're likely to bring the same 4 Pokemon to each game. Unfortunately, this prior match wasn't streamed, so we don't know all the details of what went down. Both players are guaranteed to bring their restricted, as games go in Regulation G. Michael is likely to bring Smeargle and Indeedee to enable Calyrex as a win con, and will probably bring Torkoal as his 4th to bring some extra damage. This way if Calyrex goes down, he isn't completely left in the lurch. Although Urshifu is tempting to deal with Lunala, Incineroar will cause problems for it if it goes for a dark move and gets locked into it thanks to its choice band. And Raging Bolt isn't super well suited for this match, as Lunala can outbulk it and win in the long game. As well, it doesn't hit anything super effectively, barring Eric's Tornadus. Eric is very likely to bring both of his pivot Pokemon, Incineroar and Rillaboom. As mentioned, to keep up fake out pressure and allow Lunala to set up, while healing Lunala with grassy terrain and overriding psychic terrain. Tornadus is likely to not come to this set. It could provide value with Rain Dance to remove the sun from Torkoal, but Eric doesn't need Tailwind at all in this match, and it would only be a hindrance with Trick Room up. Since Tornadus' main goal is to set Tailwind, he's probably going to leave it behind. It's also weak to Calyrex's Glacial Lance, and its main purpose is to outspeed faster teams, and since Michael's team is slower, it isn't well suited in this matchup. Scream Tail also isn't very likely to come, since again it wants to outspeed things and disrupt them by moving first. With the booster energy, it will always be the fastest Pokemon in the set, and it will be moving last when Trick Room is up. That leaves Ogerpon Cornerstone. Ogerpon is also great in this set, as it hits very hard with a Rock Ivy Cudgel, and it will hit both Calyrex and Torkoal super effectively, even if they Terastallize. Not to mention its ability to help Lunala set up with protection from Follow Me. And its ability Sturdy can also allow it to tank a hit from something like Calyrex Ice and still survive, allowing Eric to stall Trick Room turns more effectively. Without further ado, let's get into Game 1. Eric leads Incineroar and Lunala, while Michael leads his tried and true Smeargle Calyrex. This lead is very difficult for Eric, primarily due to the wide array of possibilities Smeargle enables. Eric of course wants to deny Trick Room with a taunt or fake out into Calyrex, but ignoring Smeargle leaves it able to Spore something, as both of Eric's Pokemon are vulnerable to Spore. He could also Moongeist Beam into Calyrex for big damage right away, but a Follow Me from Smeargle would render that play useless. It's very easy to overpredict what Smeargle will do, so he goes for a simpler play of setting up with Lunala and using Calm Mind, while using Fake Out into one of Michael's Pokemon, likely Smeargle since it has no way to avoid it. Michael decides that Incineroar's Fake Out pressure into Smeargle is too strong to ignore and doesn't go for a Spore play. If he goes for Spore and Incineroar fakes it out, Smeargle's Focus Sash will break and it will do nothing, leaving Calyrex vulnerable. He opts to use his faster Fake Out from Smeargle into Incineroar, and set up his win condition of Trick Room with Calyrex. Smeargle's Fake Out connects into Incineroar while the Rocky Helmet damages it, breaking the Focus Sash. Incineroar flinches, losing its turn. Lunala sets up its Calm Mind, while Calyrex gets off its Trick Room. On turn 2, a Moongeist Beam from Lunala into Calyrex is very tempting, as it will deal huge super effective damage, and with a +1 special attack boost will pick up a KO. But this is a very risky play for a few reasons. First, Smeargle can again use Follow Me to redirect the super effective attack, making it useless. Second, Calyrex can Terastallize into Fire to remove its weakness, allowing it to survive the attack. Calyrex will also attack first, so a second Glacial Lance the following turn might pick up the KO on Lunala. Third, Calyrex can simply protect, while Smeargle spores something, leaving Michael way ahead in the match. Eric, however, makes the best possible play, and uses Flare Blitz into Smeargle while locking in Moongeist Beam into Calyrex. So how does this cover all three of those options? Since Incineroar is slower than Lunala, it can remove the Smeargle before Lunala moves, allowing the Moongeist Beam to gun down the Calyrex. It doesn't matter if Smeargle goes for Follow Me or Spore, since Incineroar is also slower than Smeargle, as we saw its Fake Out move after. Since Michael sees this as a likely play, and he's forced to respect the Moongeist Beam pressure, he uses Terra Fire on Calyrex to turn this attack into a neutral hit. It also gives a fire resistance into possible future Flare Blitzes from Incineroar, and it will resist grass attacks from Rillaboom. He doesn't protect with Calyrex as he needs to use the Trick Room turns he has to build up damage. Since Smeargle can't do much here against this good play from Eric, Michael opts to swap it into Torkoal to resist the likely incoming Flare Blitz and a possible incoming Moonblast, and it puts another Trick Room threat online while Trick Room is still active. With both players making great plays, let's see how the turn rolls out. Smeargle swaps out for Torkoal, setting the sun with Drought. Calyrex moves next and Terastallizes into Fire, while firing off a Glacial Lance. Lunala takes decent damage thanks to a critical hit, but is still pretty healthy thanks to Shadow Shield. Incineroar fires a now resisted but sun-boosted Flare Blitz into Torkoal, while Lunala lands its +1 Moongeist Beam into Calyrex, dealing just over half of its HP. Lunala chip heals with leftovers, leaving it at around 80%. In turn 3, Michael here needs to continue to put pressure on Eric, since both of his Trick Room threats will move first. He knows that Eric wants to continue to chip heal with Lunala, and he wants to stall Trick Room, so a Protect from Lunala is very likely. A Glacial Lance and Eruption or Heat Wave from Torkoal will almost certainly pick up the KO on Lunala. Even more reason for Eric to protect it. Knowing that this Protect is likely, and the pressure that a double spread attack exerts, Michael opts to use Weather Ball into Incineroar rather than go for the obvious spread move. A Heat Wave or Weakened Eruption and Glacial Lance into Incineroar probably won't finish it off this turn, and will allow it to get off a parting shot and come back in later to exert more pressure. So he commits the single target move Weather Ball into Incineroar. While it's still resisted, it will do significantly more damage than either spread move. Weather Ball and the resisted Glacial Lance might pick up the KO on this Incineroar. Since Torkoal is slower, it will move first, allowing Calyrex to move after and to pick up the KO, giving it an attack boost. You may be wondering, why not go for Earth Power to deal super effective damage to Incineroar and remove it regardless of what Calyrex does? Using the Weather Ball will deal just enough damage to, as mentioned, allow Calyrex to pick up the KO after gaining an attack boost. Using a Fire attack also covers if Eric switches into either of his Grass types, which will deal much more damage than Earth Power would to them. Eric's safest play is to protect Lunala, as the threat of a double up is too great, so that's what he locks in. Incineroar doesn't have Protect, so he likely tries to parting shot the Torkoal. Torkoal goes for the Weather Ball, dealing about 40% to Incineroar, leaving it just low enough HP for Calyrex to pick up the KO with Glacial Lance. Calyrex gets its attack boost, and Lunala recovers a little bit of HP with leftovers. Eric sends in Rillaboom in place of the fallen Incineroar, setting grassy terrain. Eric is very much on the back foot at this point. Lunala will fall to a double up since it can't protect this turn, and Rillaboom is highly threatened by fire and ice attacks. However, Rillaboom can fake out something to prevent a double up this turn, keeping Lunala alive. Eric has also not yet Terastallized. Terra Fire on Rillaboom will allow it to completely flip its bad matchup, and turn these fire and ice weaknesses into resistances. Torkoal cannot avoid a fake out, so Rillaboom is free to target that slot. Michael, however, likely has Indeedee in the back, which is a common switch into Rillaboom, allowing it to overwrite the terrain and block any incoming priority attacks. Eric decides to read the switch into Indeedee and locks in U-turn into the Torkoal slot, while using Moongeist Beam into Calyrex. Michael does indeed respect the fake out pressure, and swaps Torkoal out for Indeedee. Again, keeping up the Trick Room pressure, he clicks Glacial Lance. With the +1 attack, it's possible that this can KO the Lunala, despite it sitting at around 85%. Rillaboom Terastallizes, as Torkoal swaps out for Indeedee, setting Psychic Terrain. In the meantime, Calyrex lands a Glacial Lance. Rillaboom takes around 35%, thanks to a resistance, and Lunala is left at just under 5% HP, narrowly surviving the attack. Rillaboom U-turns into the newly switched in Indeedee, dealing around 45%, thanks to it being super effective. Indeedee's Rocky Helmet damages Rillaboom as it switches out for Ogerpon. Lunala lands its second Moongeist Beam into Calyrex, finishing it off and removing it from the game. Michael brings in Torkoal as it's his only other form of damage. Being the last turn of Trick Room, and Michael having lost his primary source of damage, the game is all but secured for Eric now. He can protect with both Pokemon to run out the last turn of Trick Room and then clean up the following turn. Michael simply attacks with both Pokemon in case Eric doesn't protect for some reason, as Ogerpon needs to be attacked twice to go down. Both of Eric's Pokemon protect, avoiding the Heat Wave from Torkoal and a Psychic from Indeedee. Lunala further heals with leftovers while Trick Room expires. Eric has successfully weathered the storm of Michael's Trick Room, and can easily clean up the game from here. Neither of Michael's Pokemon can protect, so Eric locks in Ivy Cudgel into Indeedee and a Moongeist Beam into Torkoal. It may seem unintuitive to use the Rock attack into the Redirector rather than the Fire type, and using the Ghost attack while a normal type Redirector is on the field. However, Indeedee is at such low HP that it will likely fall to just an Ivy Cudgel. And since Ogerpon is faster than Lunala, it can remove the Indeedee before Lunala attacks, preventing its Follow Me from neutralizing the Moongeist Beam. Being at +1 special attack, Lunala's neutral Moongeist Beam will finish off the Torkoal. Michael uses Follow Me and Heat Wave in hopes of keeping Torkoal alive for a turn. Indeedee uses Follow Me, but swiftly goes down to Ogerpon's Ivy Cudgel. Lunala then removes the Torkoal with the Moongeist Beam while Smeargle switches in. Smeargle cannot possibly take on all three of Eric's remaining Pokemon, so Michael concedes. What an incredible game 1. What can we learn from it? Let's first analyze our speed tiers. Based on what we saw, we can see our speed tiers go something like this, from fastest to slowest. Ogerpon Cornerstone, and then Smeargle and Lunala, then Rillaboom and Indeedee, then Incineroar, Calyrex, and Torkoal. We have a couple undefined speed tiers at this point, so we'll see how those progress as we see more matches. We saw the pressure Michael exerts with Trick Room active. Huge damage and complementary offensive coverage from both Calyrex and Torkoal makes this a difficult situation to maneuver around. Although Fire and Ice is great offensive coverage, Incineroar unfortunately resists both of them, and having Terra Water instead of Terra Grass still enables Incineroar to resist both of those types of attacks, whereas if it was Terra Grass it would then become weak to both Fire and Ice. However, a player as good as Eric is able to see the best plays from both sides and react accordingly. He was able to maneuver his pivots in and out with perfect timing to apply Fake Out pressure. This, combined with his generous use of Protects, allowed him to stall out Michael's Trick Room. We also saw the incredible bulk invested on Lunala, as it was able to stay on the field after taking a critical hit Glacial Lance with Shadow Shield active, and then take a +1 Glacial Lance after some leftovers recovery. The most influencing part of this match was the way Eric's Fake Out pressure affected Michael's play. Eric was able to capitalize on them in turns 2, 3, and 4. Turn 2, he attacked with both Pokemon as Smeargle was forced to switch out. Turn 3, Incineroar went down, but would have switched out with a Parting Shot if it survived, setting up Rillaboom the following turn. Whether Incineroar feinted to get a switch into Rillaboom or landed a slow Parting Shot, either way it would have allowed Rillaboom to come in unscathed. Whereas in turn 4, the newly switched in Rillaboom was able to exert a lot of pressure with Fake Out. Although Rillaboom didn't actually click Fake Out, the pressure it exerted forced Michael to switch in the Indeedee, which allowed Eric to use U-turn and keep up his positioning. Thanks to Trick Room being up, it moved after Calyrex, which enabled Rillaboom to take the Glacial Lance, allowing Ogerpon to come in unscathed. Michael will need to adjust to win the next game. Although there is not much to adjust with what Pokemon he brings, he will need to read ahead of Eric's plays, perhaps mind games with Smeargle and bringing Torkoal in earlier to have more time to deal damage with it. Just before we move into Game 2, if you like this type of content, make sure to subscribe. It really helps grow the channel, and I can't say how much I appreciate it. And if you don't mind as well, feel free to like the video and share it with someone you think might also enjoy. Let's move into Game 2. Turn 1 of Game 2, both players lead the same Pokemon, with Incineroar and Lunala for Eric, and Calyrex and Smeargle for Michael. We find ourselves in a similar situation to Turn 1 of Game 1, since the leads are the same. However, Michael knows his play last game of Fake Out and Trick Room resulted in a loss, so he needs to try something different. Knowing that Eric went for a Fake Out and Calm Mind last game, he could be more free to set Trick Room and bring in Torkoal right now for Smeargle. As long as the Fake Out is going into the Smeargle slot, he can still set Trick Room with Calyrex, and then have both damage threats online right away. Eric really is forced to Fake Out the Smeargle, as if he doesn't, a possible Spore would be detrimental. He again uses Calm Mind with Lunala to put its damage online. Eric could try and predict an early switch from Michael and go for a Moongeist Beam right away, as this would put him pretty far ahead in the match, getting in big damage on Calyrex very early. But if Michael terastallizes to fire right away, Moongeist Beam will not be a 2-hit KO without the Calm Mind setup. So if he attacks without the boost, it becomes a neutral hit and he'll be set back. Whereas if he commits and sets up now, even if Michael terras later, the attack will still be a 2-hit KO down the line. So if he attacks into Calyrex now, Calyrex will essentially be at 2-hit KO range after the attack. Whereas if he sets up, it will still be in 2-hit KO range, but Lunala will be better off. Smeargle swaps out for Torkoal, which eats the incoming Fake Out. Lunala sets up Calm Mind, while Calyrex sets Trick Room. Michael here is primed with both of his Trick Room damage threats online, and Torkoal is at high HP, so Eruption can still deal big damage. Attacking with both Pokemon is a given, so the real decision is what moves to attack with. Torkoal has a choice spec, so whatever he picks he will be locked into for the time being. Eruption seems like a good choice, for huge damage, maybe even committing Terra Fire. But Incineroar resists the attack, and Lunala's Shadow Shield will really hamper the damage of an attack like this. A Protect from Lunala is possible to stall Trick Room, but since it hasn't taken damage yet and is set up, it's not super likely as Eric wants to be able to attack and make use of its Shadow Shield. Michael decides to lock in Earth Power into Incineroar, as he knows how valuable Eric's pivot pieces are. If he can remove it here, he'll get a huge advantage. As for Calyrex, a Glacial Lance and Earth Power might KO the Incineroar. This will also damage Lunala, breaking its Shadow Shield. He could go for Close Combat for a almost guaranteed KO on Incineroar when combined with Earth Power, but this would lower his defenses, leaving the Lunala's Shadow Shield online while it gets an attack into weakened Calyrex is not ideal. so he locks in Glacial Lance and Earth Power. He's also forced to commit Terra Fire on Calyrex, since Lunala isn't going down this turn thanks to Shadow Shield, and an unterracialized Calyrex will drop to a +1 super effective Moongeist Beam. Eric again wants to make use of Lunala's Shadow Shield, so he locks in Moongeist Beam into Calyrex, setting it up to be KO'd next turn if it terrestrializes, and KOing it now if it doesn't. He also realizes how valuable his Incineroar is, and he knows Michael has Earth Power. Knowing this is a real possibility, he decides to terrestrialize Incineroar to water, ensuring it still resists both fire and ice attacks, while becoming neutral to the ground and fighting offense from Michael's side. This guarantees it will survive any combination of attacks from Michael, barring a possible close combat and Earth Power. But as mentioned, a close combat is very unlikely here, as that would leave Lunala healthy and free to do whatever it wants. He locks in Parting Shot into Torkoal, which will leave it a sitting duck on the field at -1, and preserves Incineroar. Calyrex terrestrializes into fire, while Incineroar terrestrializes to water. Torkoal's Earth Power lands into Incineroar, dealing around 30% due to being a non-stab neutral hit. Calyrex's Glacial Lance deals about 25% to Incineroar, and 20% to Lunala thanks to the Shadow Shield. Incineroar's Parting Shot lowers Torkoal's offense, as Eric brings in Rillaboom, setting grassy terrain. We see Lunala's Moongeist Beam hit Calyrex, but this time it deals just under 50%. With this low damage roll, combined with a grassy terrain recovery, means a second Moongeist Beam might not be enough to finish off Calyrex in 2 hits. Michael is again face down with Fake Out pressure from Rillaboom, and as usual, he needs to respect it. With the weakened Torkoal on the field, he swaps it out for Indeedee, to bring the terrain and prevent any priority attacks. As the Trick Room timer continues to tick, it uses Glacial Lance again to keep building damage. Eric wants to land another attack into Calyrex, so Lunala again locks in Moongeist Beam. Rillaboom could go for a Fake Out, but the threat of Indeedee in the back is too high. Rillaboom will also fall to a Glacial Lance, so his best play is to hard switch back to Incineroar. Incineroar resists Glacial Lance and can continue the pivot train. Torkoal swaps out for Indeedee, who overwrites the terrain, and Rillaboom swaps out for Incineroar. Calyrex's Glacial Lance deals another 25% to Incineroar, and 40% to Lunala, since the Shadow Shield has been broken. Lunala's Moongeist Beam connects into Calyrex. Combined with its previous low roll, this time it gets a high roll. However, this leaves Calyrex on exactly 1 HP. That one turn of grassy terrain recovery really mattered. Michael's Calyrex sitting at 1 HP has to be infuriating for Eric, but he's not out of the game yet. Before we consider their moves, I would like to comment on a play proposed by the casters of the match. Depending on the casters, I find the suggested plays by them are usually not the best possible play, but this one was actually very interesting and actually I think a good suggestion. Since Calyrex is slowed low, any damage at all will finish it off. Trick Room is still up, so Calyrex will move first. But Fake Out, with priority, will move before Calyrex and finish it off. Of course, the current terrain will prevent any priority attacks. The suggested play was to swap Lunala to Rillaboom, instantly overriding the terrain, then allowing Incineroar to finish off Calyrex with a Fake Out. This would put Eric far ahead, removing Calyrex. This is a bit of a risky play, however, as if he goes for this and Calyrex protects, the whole turn is completely lost. However, since Michael wants the most of his Trick Room turns, protecting is pretty unlikely from Michael here as well. And with the grassy terrain up, he could follow the next turn up with a Fake Out from Rillaboom, or even a Grassy Glide, which might finish it off despite a grassy terrain recovery. This play would set Eric up to take out Calyrex this turn or the next turn, so I think it would have been a very interesting play and could have won Eric the match if he planned it out properly. As you can tell, this is not the play that happened, but would have been a fun possibility, and I thought it was interesting to consider. Eric doesn't really want to swap Lunala out at this point, since he would lose his Calm Mind boosts. He decides that Michael is probably going for another Glacial Lance, so he opts to protect Lunala again, allowing it to recover from leftovers and stall Trick Room turns, as there's no need to make a fancy play right now. Incineroar is likely going for a Parting Shot to again continue pivoting. Michael of course goes for another Glacial Lance. Incineroar is at so low HP that this Glacial Lance will likely pick up the KO. Rather than go for a helping hand on Indeedee to likely remove the Lunala as well with the Glacial Lance, he expects the protect from Lunala and swaps Indeedee out for Torkoal. This not only brings in more damage, but will allow him to reset the terrain should Rillaboom come back in. Indeedee swaps out for Torkoal while Lunala protects. Calyrex's Glacial Lance finishes off Incineroar, granting it an attack boost. Eric brings in Ogerpon as Lunala heals with leftovers. There's one turn of Trick Room left. but Eric cannot protect with Lunala as he just protected last turn. Whenever we say things cannot protect due to previously protecting, it of course is still possible to get a double protect, but the odds are quite bad, being only 1/3, and most of the time you'll have a better option than this. But sometimes when your back is against the wall, a 1/3 odds of winning are the best odds you have. Eric realizes his Lunala will now likely go down to the +1 Glacial Lance, and it will go down to a double up pretty much guaranteed. He attempts a double protect on Lunala, and Spiky Shield with Ogerpon, as if he can stall this last Trick Room turn, he still has a chance at the game. Michael could guarantee the KO on Lunala by attacking with both Pokemon, and he does attack with Calyrex as it's under no real threat, since it will move first and he has priority off the table. He however opts to switch out Torkoal for Smeargle. With Trick Room ending this turn, he needs to position himself next turn to be able to get it back up. Smeargle provides the pressure Michael needs for this to happen. And with a likely protect from Eric, this could be a free switch. The pressure Smeargle provides with Follow Me, and thanks to its Focus Sash still being active, Smeargle is guaranteed to be able to redirect 2 attacks with its Follow Me, allowing Calyrex to set Trick Room again or just get off more damage. Torkoal switches out for Smeargle to come in as Ogerpon uses Spiky Shield and Lunala gets the double protect. Calyrex's Glacial Lance does nothing as Lunala heals again with leftovers. Thanks to the smart Smeargle switch in, Michael can make the play that guarantees Calyrex survives another turn. Follow Me on Smeargle and Glacial Lance on Calyrex. Trick Room could have been an option here for sure to ensure that Calyrex will start moving first again, but at this point with 2 redirectors alive, perhaps Michael felt it wasn't necessary, as Follow Me guarantees Calyrex can survive for at least 2 turns, which will be more than enough to win. Eric needs to remove the Calyrex, but he can't, thanks to Follow Me. He uses Ivy Cudgel for guaranteed damage, and he's forced to go for Moonblast, as a redirected Moongeist Beam won't do anything. Smeargle uses Follow Me, redirecting both the Ivy Cudgel and Moonblast, knocking Smeargle out. Calyrex gets off its Glacial Lance, removing Lunala, getting an attack boost, and bringing Ogerpon down to its sturdy. Eric brings in Rillaboom for Lunala, setting the grassy terrain, while Indeedee comes in right after, changing the terrain back to Psychic. Eric has spent his Terra, so both his Pokemon are vulnerable to another Glacial Lance. Michael goes for Follow Me with Indeedee to preserve Calyrex this turn, but this time he decides to set up Trick Room. Although Glacial Lance would end the game, provided Ogerpon doesn't protect, Eric still has a chance at the game if he's able to one-shot the Indeedee, but the only way he can do that is with a critical hit. Ivy Cudgel has a high crit rate, but provided this Ogerpon is max attack Jolly, an Ivy Cudgel crit only has a 12.5% chance to one-shot this Indeedee, so he opts for Power Whip, which has higher damage. Power Whip crit will pick up a one-shot guaranteed. He also uses Wood Hammer for maximum damage. If he's able to one-shot the Indeedee, Rillaboom can move next and finish off the Calyrex. Indeedee goes for Follow Me, while Ogerpon's Power Whip not only doesn't crit, but misses altogether. Rillaboom's Wood Hammer does almost exactly 50% to Indeedee as Calyrex sets Trick Room. Eric forfeits on the next turn, as now Calyrex will move first and easily pick out both KOs. So what did we learn from Game 2? We saw Michael adapt his early play, allowing Torkoal to come in earlier and exert more pressure, forcing the Terrestrialization from Incineroar. We also found out that a +1 Moongeist Beam is not a guaranteed 2-hit KO, provided it gets 2 low rolls or low roll and grassy terrain recovery. Both players' game plan, however, stayed pretty much the same for Game 2, as Michael went for hard Trick Room, while Eric positioned around it. The low roll from Moongeist Beam was very unfortunate for Eric, as just 1 more damage point on either roll would have secured him the game, but that's just how it goes sometimes. We saw both players play well. For example, the turn Michael went for Earth Power onto Incineroar rather than a Heat Wave, while still going for Glacial Lance with Calyrex rather than a close combat, ensures that this play covers multiple options from Eric, and still keeps up the pressure on Lunala, breaking its Shadow Shield. Eric responded perfectly to this turn with an attack and a Terrestrialization from Incineroar. We also saw Michael use both redirectors much better this game, allowing him to keep Calyrex alive and dealing damage while on just 1 HP for 5 turns. Positioning Indeedee around Rillaboom to keep up the priority blocking terrain, as well as the use of Follow Me, really enabled Calyrex to stick around. Game 3 really could be either players. Will Eric adjust, expecting an early Torkoal adjustment, or keep playing as usual, trying to cover as many options as possible? Let's find out as we move into Game 3. To nobody's surprise, both players lead the same Pokemon, as they're both confident it's the correct play. The same Smeargle mind games persist, but Michael decides he needs to mix things up a bit, as he lost Game 1 with his safe play, and narrowly lost Game 2 with another safe play, thanks to the Calyrex survival. He opts to try and Spore Lunala in hopes that Eric doesn't fake out Smeargle, and expects a Torkoal switch in. He also attacks with Calyrex rather than set Trick Room right away. We know Calyrex can survive a +1 Moongeist Beam when Terra Fire, so using this alternate early game plan to break the Shadow Shield early and possibly remove the Lunala earlier is a good one. Since Michael is expecting Eric to expect the Trick Room to come out again, Eric might attack turn 1 rather than set up, so Michael commits an early turn 1 Terastallization to remove the Ghost weakness from Calyrex. Eric, on the other hand, is taking no risks with his turn 1, as it won him game 1 and had a very good chance to win him game 2, Torkoal switch in or no. He again fake out Smeargle and sets up Calm Mind. Incineroar fake out Smeargle while Lunala moves next and gets up a Calm Mind. Smeargle flinches and Calyrex lands its Glacial Lance. Here we can confirm that Lunala is faster than Smeargle. This next turn is one where Game 3 significantly differs from Games 1 and 2. Since Trick Room has not been set up, and Smeargle is still on the field, Eric cannot risk going for a Moongeist Beam in case Smeargle uses Follow Me. Again, since now Trick Room is not up, Lunala will be moving before Incineroar, so the play that happened Game 1, where Incineroar could Flare Blitz and remove Smeargle, while Lunala attacks after into Calyrex, is not on the table. This means that Eric has to attack with Moonblast from Lunala, as a Moongeist Beam is too risky facing a possible Follow Me. Eric locks in the Moonblast into Smeargle, hoping to remove it, and taunts the Calyrex, hoping to prevent a Trick Room. Removing the Smeargle and having Calyrex that can't set Trick Room will be a very advantageous board state for Eric. Michael knows the pressure Smeargle exerts with a possible Follow Me. He again tries to make a slightly harder read than the previous game, and swaps out Smeargle for Torkoal, despite Trick Room not being up. Torkoal, being a fire type, resists a likely incoming Moonblast. He also respects the possibility of a taunt, and just opts to attack again with Calyrex. Smeargle swaps out for Torkoal, who eats the incoming Moonblast, dealing around 38%. Incineroar taunts Calyrex as it goes for a Glacial Lance, leaving Incineroar just under half HP, and leaving Lunala at around 30. At this point, Eric is on the back foot, as he's been unable to deal any damage to Calyrex, while it continues to chip away with Glacial Lances. Another Glacial Lance into Lunala is likely to take the KO at this range, so Eric protects with Lunala to recover up with leftovers. He could Parting Shot with Incineroar to reposition, but rather than go for that, he opts to Flare Blitz into Calyrex. This may seem like a bad play, as Incineroar has already gotten its taunt off, and a resisted Flare Blitz won't deal much damage. But the more likely thought process behind this decision is that Eric wants Incineroar to faint, giving him a free switch in at the end of the turn. Since Incineroar is faster than Calyrex, a Parting Shot will move first, and bringing in a Grass type that will just fall to an incoming Glacial Lance. Eric wants to be able to switch in a Grass type after Calyrex attacks, keeping it safe. Michael could press his offense with Torkoal like he did last game, perhaps using Earth Power on Incineroar again, or a Heat Wave to hit both targets. However, he recognizes the need to keep Calyrex safe from any Moongeist beams, and he knows Incineroar has a faster Parting Shot now. Not wanting to KO the Incineroar yet, he hard swaps to Indeedee, again a normal type that can redirect away the Moongeist beams. He also locks in Glacial Lance on Calyrex. Torkoal swaps out for Indeedee, setting the Psychic Terrain. Lunala protects as Incineroar lands Flare Blitz into Calyrex, dealing around 25%. Calyrex's Glacial Lance deals another 25% to Incineroar. Michael has total command over the battlefield at this point. He's been able to prevent Lunala from dealing any meaningful damage by bringing in a Fire type to resist the Moonblast, and then cycling in normal types to possibly redirect any Moongeist beams, all the while not setting Trick Room to hamper Eric's slow pivoting options with Incineroar. Again, Eric cannot risk clicking Moongeist Beam, as a Follow Me will nullify this turn. Using Moonblast is not great, since it won't KO the Indeedee, and it will be resisted again if Torkoal switches back. The clock is ticking as Calyrex now threatens a KO on Incineroar, and possibly on Lunala as well. He needs to make some progress, so he attacks with a Moonblast from Lunala and Flare Blitz from Incineroar to remove the Indeedee. Michael, now firmly ahead in the match, does not need to make any more reads or predictions. His safest option is to Follow Me and click another Glacial Lance. This guarantees Calyrex will take no damage, and can pick up a KO on at least Incineroar, and if not, both foes. Indeedee goes for Follow Me, eating Lunala's Moonblast, while going down to Incineroar's Flare Blitz. Thanks to the Rocky Helmet chip damage and recoil from Flare Blitz, Incineroar is knocked out. Calyrex's incoming Glacial Lance is now single target, dealing full damage, which easily picks up the KO on Lunala, granting Calyrex an attack boost. Calyrex's taunt also ends this turn, allowing it to protect or Trick Room going forward. Eric sends in his two Grass types in Rillaboom and Ogerpon, while Michael sends in Smeargle. Thanks to Rillaboom's ability, changing the terrain, he can now use Fake Out. This is a very complex turn to break down. Smeargle has the faster Fake Out over Rillaboom. Since Rillaboom can't protect, it's incredibly vulnerable to getting KO'd by a Fake Out and Glacial Lance on this turn. Ogerpon, however, is threatening big damage into Calyrex with an Ivy Cudgel. Eric has not yet terrestrialized, and a Terra Rock Ivy Cudgel will likely one-shot the Fire-type Calyrex. Fake Out from Smeargle could prevent this Ogerpon from attacking instead of locking down Rillaboom, but if it targets Ogerpon, Rillaboom will be able to Fake Out Calyrex or remove Smeargle. Follow Me from Smeargle could also prevent an Ivy Cudgel from hitting Calyrex, but that would not protect Calyrex from a possible Fake Out from Rillaboom. Michael realizes the Ivy Cudgel pressure is too great to ignore, and uses Fake Out into Ogerpon. He also goes to set Trick Room with Calyrex. Eric sees the same complex turn that Michael does, and they've both come to the same conclusion. He expects Michael to Fake Out the Ogerpon, as if he doesn't, an Ivy Cudgel will win the game for Eric. So Eric opts to use Spiky Shield on Ogerpon to prevent itself from losing Sturdy. Eric also commits Rillaboom's Fake Out into Calyrex, as if Smeargle fakes out Ogerpon, this Fake Out will connect. Ogerpon uses Spiky Shield, which Smeargle attacks into, taking some chip damage. Rillaboom also uses Fake Out into Calyrex, which flinches and loses his turn. The set all comes down to whatever happens this turn. Michael needs Calyrex alive and needs Trick Room to go up to be able to win with it and Torkoal next turn. His best play is to Follow Me on Smeargle and Trick Room on Calyrex. The only way Eric can win is if he is able to knock out Calyrex, and the only way he can do that is with a Terra Rock Ivy Cudgel. However, Smeargle is using Follow Me, will force Ogerpon to attack it instead of Calyrex, and Ogerpon is faster than Rillaboom, so it will remove the Smeargle, leaving Rillaboom to damage Calyrex. Rillaboom, however, has its terrain active, and has Grassy Glide, which has a +1 priority in the terrain. Eric locks in Grassy Glide into Smeargle, and Ivy Cudgel into Calyrex, along with Terra Rock. If this Grassy Glide can KO Smeargle, it will do so before Ogerpon attacks, allowing Ogerpon's attack to connect with Calyrex instead. The set and the tournament come down to if this Grassy Glide can finish off the weakened Smeargle. Ogerpon terrestrializes into Rock. Smeargle uses Follow Me as Rillaboom uses Grassy Glide. It connects into Smeargle, who survives with just 5% HP, allowing it to also redirect the powerful incoming Ivy Cudgel. Calyrex stays safe and is able to set Trick Room. Torkoal comes in at the end of the turn to reset the sun. At this point, Eric's only chance at victory is getting 5 Spiky Shields in a row with Ogerpon. He uses Spiky Shield and goes for a Grassy Glide into Calyrex to try and get in some form of damage before Rillaboom inevitably goes down. Michael goes for a Glacial Lance and commits Earth Power into Ogerpon, as it resists any fire moves, and Rillaboom will go down to the Glacial Lance. Ogerpon uses Spiky Shield, as Rillaboom deals around 10% to Calyrex with a Grassy Glide. Earth Power bounces off the Spiky Shield, and Calyrex takes out Rillaboom with a Glacial Lance. At this point, Ogerpon does not have Sturdy, will be moving last, and is facing down a +2 attack Calyrex and a Torkoal choiced into Earth Power. He decides to go for the subsequential Spiky Shield play, as it's literally the only option he has left. Spiky Shield fails as Earth Power deals 95% to Ogerpon, while the Glacial Lance finishes it off, winning the tournament for Michael, allowing him to defend his Stockholm Regional Champion title. In this final game of the set, we saw Michael take a couple risks earlier on, going for a Spore turn 1 over Fake Out, and making switches between his normal and fire types to give Lunala the runaround. Michael put on a magnificent display of how Calyrex Ice can work even without Trick Room being active. He actually also used the lack of Trick Room early as a way to significantly disrupt Eric's pivot strategy. Eric made incredibly safe plays pretty much all set, which was so close to winning him game 2, but that low damage roll on Calyrex just couldn't quite win the game for Eric. However, making these safer plays in game 3 led him to getting red a little bit early on with the switches from Michael, preventing Lunala from doing much at all. So perhaps to win game 3, he might have needed to change things up just a little bit and make a read earlier on, either targeting Calyrex while a normal type was still in as it switched out, or predicting what would switch in to nail it with an attack. Eric's safe play still got him second at the tournament, and his style of play like this overall is a huge reason for his very consistent, amazing track record overall. But sometimes you just need to make a little bit of a read when it comes down to a final set. Turns 5 and 6 were also amazing to analyze, with fake out pressure from both parties completely changing the dynamics of how the turn can go out. I hope you enjoyed my analysis of this set and are able to use it to improve your skills based on some of the thought processes that goes on each of these moves. If you've made it this far in the video and haven't yet subscribed, I'll just give you one more reminder to do that, as we're super close to 10K. These long match replays do take quite a long time to make, so if you want to see them come out a little bit faster, feel free to check out the Patreon. And I do offer one-on-one coaching if you think analysis like this for your own replays would benefit you. I'd like to give a huge thanks to all the patrons for supporting the channel. Joseph Harriet, Brendan Donegan, Mappo, and Julia in the Delybird tier, and Harmon in the Iron Bundle tier. Thanks for watching.